Hello, and welcome to More Intelligent Tomorrow, a wide-ranging exploration of the potential impact of AI on the world around us, as envisioned by the future heroes of the human and machine intelligence revolution. How can human and artificial intelligence collaborate in Eyecare? We'll discuss this and more with Robby Dally on today's episode. And now, your host, Ari Kaplan.
Hi everyone, I am Ari Kaplan, the Director of AI Evangelism and Strategy at DataRobot, and one of the themes of the podcast is a more intelligent tomorrow. And speaking of more intelligent, one reason I asked Robby Dally with Alcon Labs to join us. So he's Director of Global Insights and Analytics. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure, thanks. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, been at Alcon now 13 and a half years now. I've kind of worked my way all throughout the organization. You know, I started out of school in IT. I spent some time in market research, marketing, forecasting, and then most recently I moved into the space of advanced analytics and really trying to get us to the world where we do machine learning and data science. And that's been an interesting journey because it's been sort of popping up all over Alcon, and I think as anybody who's going through the journey to machine learning knows, like, it's not just about the technology; it's also about domain expertise, business expertise, and so I preface kind of where we are now with my background a little bit because I think that's helped me kind of move my way into data science, even though I'm not really a kind of a data scientist by trade. I'm much more of a citizen data scientist. That's kind of where my journey has led me, and now I want to do analytics. I want to do machine learning and data science. I love it. It's so much fun, right? Like, this is the most fun I've had in any of my jobs since I've been at Alcon, and I'm not just saying that because you're talking to me on a podcast. It's true. I love it. But I look at that and I'm like, okay, I see, to your point, why somebody's in IT wants to be a data scientist, or maybe has aspirations beyond just kind of a traditional IT path. And then there's people who want traditional IT path, and that's awesome too. So I think it just affords you opportunities to do that now.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I love about Alcon, I know some of the listeners may not be familiar, LASIK surgery, but it might be helpful to, tell us a little bit more about Alcon and
Sure.
what offerings you have.
Yeah, no, sorry, I should have started there actually because, being there so long now, I just assume everybody knows it. And I think in reality, most people have probably been touched by an Alcon product or had somebody in their family who was. So two main areas of business. There's our surgical side, which is cataract surgery, refractive LASIK, or vitreoretinal, so like trauma to the eye, back of the eye type surgery, very serious. Cataract is, of course, if you know somebody who's had cataracts, they get their lens replaced. We're a leader in that industry. So there's our surgical side, and then there's our vision care side, which is contact lenses, and then dry eye and ocular health. So I say that we don't have glasses, of course, but we have just about everything else as it relates to the eye.
Yeah, totally. And I heard that it's not just for humans, that some of the people use it for their dogs or cats.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. So several years ago, my dad found a stray dog, and the little dog was in pretty rough shape. And my dad took care of him. He's great now. He's really happy. But he had cataracts, so the little guy got cataract surgery. And I don't know what model of lens is in his eyes, if it's Alcon or not, but he seems to be a happy little dog who can see. So that was great. And then the other funny one is my little dog, Paco, who's running around here somewhere. He actually has really bad dry eye. So we have to give him cyclosporin, which is a dry eye drop that stimulates his eye. Tear production is ridiculous. It's twice a day I have to give him drops. And then he also gets Sustain, which is one of our products, so it lubricates his eyes. But he's a good little dog, so I don't hold that against him too much.
So what are like some of the key uses of either DataRobot or AI in general?
Yeah, so for us, we're using it for automating a lot of our forecasting processes. So the one I talked about, DataRobot AI virtual conference, was our sales process, but there's certainly other areas of finance where we can automate forecasting or, manual back office type challenges. So we're actually, we're getting through a series of forecasting solutions, and then we'll be moving on to figuring out sort of what do we tackle next. And, there again on that 600 projects, those were all time series. So there was a very unique and challenging project in itself. And I like to think we're pretty darn good at time series now. And we're kind of a well-oiled machine there, and looking to apply. And another good thing too, right? And this is something I think is kind of gets lost, is that we went through all this hard work to get to where we are now in this project, but we got all these learnings now. We can apply those to other projects, and we've dramatically reduced time to implement. Even just like on the part where we take the data, parse it, send it into DataRobot, pull it back, right? That's all like a really impressive Python package. And a time series is so nuanced, right? And so we've learned all these rules. So if we were building a new time series project from scratch, we would know little things like can't have a negative if you want a zero inflated model. That's just one of those things you just don't learn until you go do it, right? You can't read books for everything and know every rule without just going in and getting your hands dirty.
What's the thought process of coming up with new ideas? Is it there's like so much pent up demand, or are you sitting in a room being creative on a walk with your dog and it comes to you?
Sometimes the inspiration will strike on the dog walk. We actually, it's kind of interesting lately. So we have 600 projects, not 600 use cases. I would be very terrified if we had 600 use cases, although I suspect maybe there are. We probably have a list of like what I would say like 10 to 20 really good use cases. That's already more than we can do right now, right? That's a lot of use cases because some of them are pretty big. This is where we've worked with our team from DataRobot. Matt, he helps me out a lot in kind of thinking through use cases. And you mentioned it, which is like, all right, do we have the data? Is it value add? Is it super complex, right? Like something could be like a really cool idea and provide a lot of value, but it's so hard it's going to take us 10 years. That's probably not worth it when we can do something that gives us like 25% of the ROI, but we do it in 6 months. So I think like learning how to frame ideas has been really important for curating a backlog of AI ideas. And look, the other reality is that Alcon's been around a long time, been very successful. Alcon's very early in the machine learning, data science, AI revolution. And so a big part of that is there are more use cases I don't even know about that are happening in other groups and within Alcon. And they're bubbling up as people start to learn what is possible. And we presented at a town hall on our recent project, and I had somebody come to me afterwards and they said, "Hey, I've got a really great idea. What do you think?" And I'm like, "That's a phenomenal idea." And I never would have known, right? They just saw the presentation. They were inspired by the applying machine learning to transform processes, and they came to us, and now we're going to talk to them next week and start to flesh out a use case. So inspiration can come from a lot of different places, and in most cases it's not coming from our data scientists at Alcon. It's coming from our folks who are data experts and understand our problems. And yeah, maybe we'll have 600 use cases before I know it, which is a good
600 projects, yeah.
Yeah.
Robby, since you've been successful at it, can you explain, what is time series, and then, what makes it what makes it uniquely valuable, and then, kind of some of the lessons learned of the nuances.
Yeah, like, look, time series is a difficult beast, I like to say, and it's super valuable. So here's the challenge of time series, right? Everybody's throwing data in Excel and fit a trend line and be like, boom, time series model. This isn't so hard, right? I mean, I've definitely done it. When you start introducing all these variables, you start introducing all these different like unique series, in our case, like products. Well, they all have different patterns. They all have different seasonality. They all have different like orders of magnitude. And what you realize with time series is that like nuance matters. That's the thing we've realized, right? Like, I don't want series that have something with like 100,000 per month in it with something that have 10,000 per month, because of the way it's going to score them. It's going to always overweight the big ones, but maybe I want to actually get a good score on the little one, right? So there's just a ton of nuance in time series. But if you're trying to predict something that's cyclical and you want it to be time aware, I mean, you could use OTVs, I guess, but we do all time series modeling, time aware modeling, and like I said, kind of like the easy stuff is easy. The hard stuff is where you gotta think hard and think long and get creative and
Yeah, totally. So, like with time series, we talk about regime changes in time. So, how has like COVID and that
right,
total shift of purchasing patterns and health
right,
patterns, how's that affected your forecasting?
yeah. Look, yeah, COVID, right? I mean, you probably can't have a single one of these without mentioning COVID, and it's particularly, or it's an acutely big problem for. I don't think I said that wrong, but anyway, it's a big problem for time series, right? So I've got all this stuff that is super consistent and stable and seasonal, and then I introduce um, the shutdown of elective surgeries in the United States, right? And for 2 months, all these patterns are now destroyed. So what do you do about that? We found some workarounds about that where we've blended so what we call hybrid models, and we look at our pre-COVID runs with our post-COVID runs, and we blend things together based off of what we think rate of recoveries look like, and that's where you're kind of infusing definitely a little more art than science. But we got to get past COVID, because honestly, like, does anybody really know what's happening right now with COVID? And like we think we know, but things could change on a dime, right? So again, I go back to the elective surgery. So if you think of cataract surgery, that's an elective surgery. You can certainly put that off for a while. So if a state, say Texas and California and Florida shut down elective surgery for 2 months, like the procedures are gone. But the flip side of that is it's a procedural driven business. People don't stop having cataracts. So at some point they'll come back. So that's where we are right now, right? Like, how do we blend these things together and understand the nuance? And when do we go back to a world where it's sort of back to normal? And this is what we've talked a lot again with Dave is like, how do we handle that kind of cutoff? And at some point, do we just sort of take the COVID months and slice them out, set them aside, and say that was a bad trip? Let's not look at that data anymore because it's just so disjointed with everything else. So, like I said, we don't have all the answers yet. We've found pretty good solutions, but every month is like refresh the models and let's see what happened, right?
Yeah. Not ever. Maybe nobody has all the answers. Maybe nobody has the key answers. But yeah, it's a bounce one direction, and then as people start coming back to elective surgeries, maybe it's different slices and segmentations of the public. So for a lot of our customers, it's like the challenge of knowing what data drifted, um,
Right,
and by how much, and what data did not drift. So
right.
do you? I know you don't know everything, but do you put some thought into understanding what's drifting and what's not? And is it a monthly refresh or
Yeah,
three
no,
month refresh?
it's a great point. It is a monthly refresh. So we kind of think of it along like area of the business and um, therapeutic area of the patient. So like, look, somebody has dry eye doesn't stop because COVID has happened. So they're still going to probably buy their dry eye products. Now, do their behaviors change for a while? Do they go pantry stock, right? Kind of like they run on toilet paper and paper towels and Lysol wipes. Does everybody think, oh crud, I got to get my dry eye drops because what if there's a disruption? I don't want to deal with that. So you have something like that, and then you have like vitreoretinal surgery I mentioned earlier is a trauma, usually trauma or like a serious eye condition. Like that stuff can't wait. That's not elective surgery. So that's more or less going to be it's going to be less impacted.
So the title of this podcast is A More Intelligent Tomorrow. So curious, 5 or 10 years from now, what we're having a conversation. What are we going to be talking about?
Wow, yeah, that's interesting. I've been so in the here and now that I haven't considered where some of that is going, right? So like kind of like on a personal side of things, I'm a big Tesla guy. Okay, so I think it's super cool, and I look at that and I look at how hard it's getting to get to full self driving, right? So, but at some point they will, right? And then the world just changes, right? Once a car can drive itself, and again, I'm down my Tesla rabbit hole here, right? Self-driving taxis, for example, the world just changes fundamentally. So I don't know for sure what it looks like, but I do know that there's a lot of smart people who talk about what AI and machine learning could mean, and sort of like higher level, like 10, 15 years type things, like how when AI starts becoming incredibly smart versus sort of narrow AI that we have right now. Like in our world though, like if I kind of zoom out of the conceptual and the world of Elon, if I kind of come back to Alcon world, like I really hope 5 to 10 years from now, we've got just like tons of machine learning, data science implementations happening, and we've reduced a lot of mundane, like you mentioned earlier, mundane work, and replaced it with work that's just more impactful and value driving. And it's going to change the company. I believe it'll change the company, many companies around the world. And I'm just really excited that my company will be on the forefront of that, I believe, versus even like where we were 2 years ago, we weren't in the world of AI and machine learning at all, really. And yet here we are now diving head first. So again, I suspect most companies are in that same path. And if you're not, that's probably not going to put you in a very good competitive situation.
Yeah, so I love Tesla and the whole concept of self-driving and automation, both in enterprise artificial intelligence and then kind of non-business. Um, have you ever been in a Tesla?
Yeah, I actually own a Tesla. Yeah,
Oh,
I have a couple-year-old or 4-year-old Model S, and I love it. I love the concept of electric vehicles in general. It's super fun to drive, and I am fascinated by the world of computer vision and artificial intelligence driving the car. And I think of the societal impact, right? Of if cars could drive themselves, how much safer the roads could be, and what that would mean. And so there's job transformations, of course, that go along with that, but the world is a safer place, and that's an amazing idea, right? That you could change the world and make it better. And that's sort of like the moonshot projects, right? So we're talking enterprise AI and where we're at, and it's a lot more blocking and tackling, right? To use the sports analogy, sometimes it's not glamorous, but it's the stuff that enables you to do the really cool stuff and the glamorous stuff.
yeah, no, it's super fascinating, and it's one of the themes we hear around artificial intelligence these days are like trusted AI. So like the whole, the Tesla, trust at this point, to sleep for 3 hours in it, but on a more day by day basis, there's trust or lack of trust in insight. So you mentioned sports analogies at the beginning. You can't go to a general manager and say, we want to recruit Michael Jordan, or we don't want to recruit him. You want to give reasons for or against, and people kind of have to trust you as a person and data. But what challenges have you faced with AI trust? Like what, either for you personally or people you're trying to convince, makes it good enough?
Yeah, I think where you run into that is where you have like very knowledgeable business users, right, who really understand their data. And the common trap you run into at first is you make a prediction and they're like, well, yeah, I could have told you that, right? Like this, and this. It's a very obvious thing. The flip side of that, I would say, is look, if the machine learning doesn't get the obvious one right, well, okay, maybe there's a reason it didn't because it wasn't so obvious. But actually, that's kind of proof of validation. And where we are again on this journey is I think about some of our upcoming projects. Our goal is not to be perfect with machine learning and answer every single observation. Like what we really want to do is take where we've got like 1,000 observations that have come in and that would have to all be manually reviewed.
Yeah. Hey, Robby, thank you so much for being a guest on a More Intelligent Tomorrow, or DataRobot podcast. Really appreciate going over a huge variety of topics. It's been a lot of fun, so much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.